Hello and welcome along to Team Talks. A midweek match round has only just finished, but a full Premier League weekend is just around the corner after plenty of drama in the last few days.
Steven Gerrard has left Aston Villa as the manager with immediate effect.
Yeah, more on that story to come. But as one match round ends, another one begins. Nottingham Forest kick things off against Liverpool on Saturday before Everton host Crystal Palace and Manchester City play Brighton. Then it's a big one in the late game as Chelsea take on Manchester United. 5 matches follow on Sunday, including Aston Villa in their first game since sacking Steven Gerrard. They're up against Brentford. The later fixture is Spurs against Newcastle. And then there's more Monday night football to look forward to as well as West Ham face Bournemouth. And joining me in the studio to preview all of this weekend's games, former midfielder Farrell Williams alongside journalist Sam Lee. Good to see you both. I think we should start with that big managerial news from last night. Steven Gerrard has been sacked as the Aston Villa boss after 11 months in charge. What did you make of that news?
I think the timing. I think it was going to happen based on the fixtures. I think they had a period of fixtures where I think they gave him time. They were winnable games for Aston Villa, and he didn't win it. And I don't just think it's just this season. I think they haven't performed well enough under Gerrard. I know they've had some injuries, but I think it's the manner in which they've been losing the games and how they've been performing. You could see since the Mings armband scenario, I think he lost the dressing room, lost a lot of the players, and he's found it difficult to get everybody back on board. So I think the timing, I think these next 4 games for Aston Villa, I don't think are winnable anyway. So whether Gerrard's there or not, and they don't seem to have a replacement, you might have thought they would have kept him at least till the World Cup break before then sacking him or rethinking the decision.
Well, the last straw really was the 3-0 defeat last night against Fulham, Sam. What have you made of their performances this season? Do you think part of the reason for his departure and Villa obviously losing patience with him is because with the squad they have, the expectation was so much more?
Yeah, well, it goes back to not just the summer just gone, but last summer, obviously, when they sold Grealish, and they were very happy with the business they did with Ings and Buendia and players like that. I think it was like when Spurs sold Gareth Bale, but it kind of went the same way. That didn't work out either. And then obviously they got Coutinho in, who started really well. So yeah, there was, and that tailed off. But then there was those expectations going back to that. Gerrard started off fairly well in terms of the first couple of months, but it never really got off the ground. Even like I remember January time, it was like, what are they actually doing? And then it just carried on drifting. And in terms of those performances, it's because there wasn't really an identifiable style either. Like I remember going to one of his first games when they played City, and they were trying to play out from the back, and the fans were getting annoyed. And I was like, oh, you just got to push through this, and they'll get used to it. But they never really were a team that played out from the back, but they weren't really a direct team. And I think that's why, as well as the performances not being great, the fans thought, well, I'm not sure where they're trying to go. And also, in the end, I don't think the fans warmed to Gerrard either. So that and loads of off-field stuff about maybe complaints over who they're signing and who they should be signing and all this kind of stuff. It needed to happen.
Well, look, there's a long way to go this season. You said, Farah, the next few fixtures are looking tricky. They've only had 9 points so far, sitting just above the bottom 3. So who is the manager that's going to come in and turn things around? Pochettino has been linked with the job, but he's supposedly counted himself out of it. Another man who used to manage in the Premier League, Unai Emery's been linked with the role. Ruben Amorim, who's the Sporting Lisbon manager, who plays really good football, has been linked with the job. Who do you think's the right fit?
You've been hearing loads of names thrown about. I actually am unsure who is the right man for the job. I know Aston Villa are an ambitious club that they've got big history behind them. They see themselves as a big team, and the fans do. And the fans want instant success, and success for them is Europe. And that's what they've been. They thought they were bringing a young manager in Gerrard, and the success he had at Rangers hasn't quite worked out. So it's a difficult one. As I said, I felt they should have kept hold of Gerrard at least until Christmas break with the World Cup, and then maybe rethought things, because as I said, the next few fixtures are difficult for Aston Villa. But I don't know. I don't know where the club want to go. I think you could even see that with Gerrard's signing. They heavily invested in attack-minded players, but it's the back where they need to start from. I think under Dean Smith they wasn't. They still conceded a lot of goals. That was the area I felt when Gerrard come in should have strengthened first, and he didn't. He went the opposite way, and it's failed on him.
What would be an interesting one? Yeah. Brendan Rodgers.
Oh, he ain't jumping ship there, surely.
Why? Because it feels like he's not far from getting the sack as well. If they had a couple of bad results, he'd go. And if you get the opportunity now just to make a little parallel move across the Midlands to Villa, good move for everyone, that. I don't think it's going to happen, but It's an interesting show.
But it just shows that when you get the backing of the chairman with Brendan Rodgers at Leicester, and there was a few weeks ago they were saying he was touch and go as to get the sack depending on results, and they were still losing, and they kept the faith in him and trusted in him, and he's kind of turning that around a little bit. Maybe they could have done that with Steven Gerrard. As I said, just the timing of it. It's the same with Wolves. We're getting rid of managers and there's no replacement, no instant replacement. So what is the long-term plan at these clubs? And for Aston Villa, for such a big club to do it and not have a backup plan, bit crazy for me.
Yeah. All right, well, watch this space. It is Brentford for Aston Villa this weekend. This is what else is coming up, though. We're going to be hearing from Pep Guardiola as Manchester City look to bounce back from defeat last weekend when they host Brighton at the Etihad. We'll also discuss the league leaders Arsenal, who travel to Southampton looking to make it 10 wins out of 11 in the top flight this season. And we'll look ahead to Manchester United's trip to Chelsea, where Erik ten Hag will be without Cristiano Ronaldo after dropping him from the squad.
When it's the second time, that will have consequences. That is now what we did. And so we miss him tomorrow.
Yeah, we're going to have a big discussion about that a little bit later. But let's start with the first Premier League match of the weekend. Liverpool have a trip to the Midlands to take on Nottingham Forest. Let's hear from Jurgen Klopp. But first, Steve Cooper.
Where we're at the moment, obviously, with where we are in the league and recent results, we've got to take it one game at a time, and we've got to look at everything in isolation. But these are the games that the club has longed for so many years, and I think we should also, remember that, because if we can bear that in mind, I know we'll create a really good atmosphere, which is normal in our stadium anyway, and that can help us on the day.
The atmosphere will be outstanding, I'm 100% sure. So that's what I think I like that as an experience to have it as well, because it's one thing to talk about because everybody tells you, and one thing to experience yourself. Or it's another thing. But of course, when we faced them last time, they were full of confidence. They were really flying, and we felt that. The spirit will be at 100%. They will fight for everything. They want to change their situation, and that's what we have to expect.
Well, it is a huge challenge for Nottingham Forest taking on Liverpool, who come into the match in pretty decent form. And in terms of Nottingham Forest, they did pick up a point midweek against Brighton, but it wasn't the best performance. How long is it going to take for Steve Cooper to get this team playing with a bit of identity?
That's the question. I think the turnover of players in the summer, to bring 23 players in and try and get his philosophy across to those players and identity, know which players best suit how he wants to play with this Nottingham Forest team. It's going to take time. I think, when you watch them, they seem to, in the first half, they seem to have a good 45 minutes. And the second half, it just changes. Something goes wrong in the second half, and it's become a pattern with this Nottingham Forest team. They're going to struggle. Their run of games again up till Christmas is tough in terms of picking up points. But I think it's going to take time. I don't think he actually knows which players best suits the way that they want to play at Forest. I actually can't see, how he's wanting to play. He played, last season in the Championship on a counter-attack, but he hasn't shown any sort of identity in this team yet.
And they're struggling to score goals. And against Brighton midweek, he played without an actual number 9, without a striker, and he had strikers available on the bench. What's that about?
It's like Farah says, he's trying to work out the best team, the players that he's got that can play what he wants to do. They got a one-year in who was like 18 million. I think he was the club record at that point before Gibbs White.
They should play him, right?
Yeah, stick with that. But obviously he's thinking, well, maybe we'll try something different. But the more you're chopping and changing, the one thing they have got on their side is with so many new players coming in, maybe it clicks. Maybe they come back from the World Cup and it clicks and it's great. But the other thing is, maybe it just never clicks and they're a disaster. And if he's chopping and changing and playing false nines and things like that, I can see it. I remember the game, it's not particularly recent, but when they played Tottenham, they were quite good against Tottenham, but they just had no presence in the box whatsoever. Like they don't have that finisher. And I think that's been the case in a lot of their games.
I think they've signed a lot of players that have with real good experience, whether that be in Europe or whether that be in the Premier League. And so on paper, it looks like they've brought in some great signings to keep them in the Premier League. I just think the turnover has been crazy, and it's going to take them some time. I mean, Lingard was supposed to be a big signing, yet to settle. He's got injuries, and he hasn't quite settled there. Johnson, I don't think he's actually performed at this level. I think the level's a bit too much for him at the minute.
When they
So
tried
some
to
of
get, sorry.
Yeah, go on.
When they tried to get Aurier, they obviously did get Aurier. They tried to get Aurier and Batshuayi on deadline day. I was like, there's no plan here.
Yeah, that's what it feels like. And,
Like,
and then they got rid
what
of their
suggested those players?
recruitment
manager.
players,
So it just seems a bit bizarre there.
Yeah, they've got rid of everyone but the manager.
What I
can't
did think about
control
Cooper, though,
everything.
having been an international coach, is that the turnover of international players, he would have been able to deal with that, because they often turn over international players, especially at the youth level. Quite often, a new camp, new players come in, and you play games in quick succession where game plans have to change. And so I thought, Cooper would be the right man for that, having the turnover of players. But as I say, it's taking longer than I thought or expected.
It's just difficult,
for them
isn't
to
it?
do
It's just so difficult.
Completely different, isn't it?
Yeah, and a big challenge against Liverpool, who come into the game off the back of those 2 wins, 2 clean sheets as well. Where has that put them at this point, Sam? Are they back in the race for top 4 or title?
Yeah.
Where do you see it?
Yeah, I think you can't rule them out of either. But that's not to say the last 2 games have been particularly good. They were good against City. I thought that was a kind of toss of a coin kind of game. If City had won that 1-0, you'd probably say, yeah, fair enough. And then we'd be talking about Liverpool being miles behind it. Liverpool happened to win. Again, deserved that, so fine. But against West Ham, they were fairly lucky. It was like when they beat Newcastle earlier in the season, with the late goal, and everyone was like, okay, this will sort them out, this will turn them around. And it didn't. It didn't at all. So I'm not sure. Obviously, they got the 2 wins back-to-back, the clean sheets, as you say. And they're definitely an improvement, because that Newcastle game, like I say, they were lucky to do that. And then when they lost to Arsenal, you think they're miles out of it. So maybe they have turned the corner a bit, but I'm not fully convinced. But now they've got Forest, that is a real opportunity. If they were to score 4 or 5 against Forest, maybe they would think, okay, we're back now. Because that win against City, that sparks them into life. The one thing that they were the main thing they were questioned about was their energy and intensity when they was pressing. But when City turn up, you can't not press against City. That game might have sparked something in them, because you can't just turn up and be passive against City, because you'll just get passed to death.
Yeah.
So that may have sparked something in them, but I'm not convinced just yet.
I think they've looked tired, though. That's one thing when I've watched Liverpool this season. I know everybody's been talking about Trent. It's defensively he hasn't been at the races, but I actually think they look tired. I think he's looked tired at times within the team, and I think Liverpool as a team, they look tired. I think the way in which they played, you see when Klopp come in, when he first come in, they struggled with the high intensity press. They adapted to that, and they were able to press relentlessly over 3 or 4 seasons and done it really well. I just think that some of their players, when they're trying to do that, they're a lot more slower at it. They're not at the races how we're so often used to seeing Klopp teams. So I think that's a part of the reason why you think of a Liverpool team, they press from the front. And so their defensive line is in that front line. And at the minute, they're not doing that. And so they're having to defend deeper in their own box, and the back line are getting exposed a little bit. So it's not a team we're used to seeing under Klopp, but I do think that they look like they're tired.
Do you think that's the case in the last 2 games as well, when they've got those wins?
Yeah, I think I don't think they've played with great energy, or any better energy than they have in the earlier games. I think they're a team that look tired. They've got a lot of injuries now as well, and Jota being out, that's another blow for this Liverpool team. But I think it's that. I think with Liverpool, and I think with Klopp and German managers, and I could be wrong in saying this, is that when they have midweek games, so when the Champions League's there, they tend to manage the players better. When they have a game, a week's rest and a game, the intensity of their training is still very high. And I don't know if they get the load of that right. And that's why I say at times, especially in the early games before Champions League started for Liverpool, they look really tired.
OK, let's move on and talk about Manchester City taking on Brighton. We'll hear from Roberto De Zerbi, but first, Pep Guardiola.
I just saw the last 2 games he play here, and he's already playing the way he want to play. His impact in England will be massive in the future. He's playing a different, completely different, like Italy is, with all respect, with both sides, everything is good. And a team like Sassuolo was an incredible example that no matter the quality or the big invest that you have, if you believe in something and you believe 100% in what your team want to play, you can do it.
It's very nice to play against Manchester City. For sure, we try to play with the same idea, with the same mentality. And after, I don't know the result, but we leave to Brighton to play the same style.
Well, probably not ideal for Brighton coming into this match against Manchester City, looking for their first win under Roberto De Zerbi, taking on a City side who've had a week off. They've had a rest, Sam. As the City correspondent for The Athletic, does that mean you get a week off as well?
Yeah, I suppose I did.
Did you?
I suppose I did. No, you've still got to write something even if there's no game. That's one of the hardest bits. And obviously after the Liverpool game, it would have been a bit of a difficult week, in the City planet. So it's nice to kind of get back to normal tomorrow with a home game that they'll probably win 4-0, if I'm being honest.
Thanks for that. Well, what kind of position are they in right now? Because they haven't won in their last 2 matches and didn't score in either of those as well, which isn't what we normally expect of Manchester City. How much will they be looking forward to just getting back out on the pitch and getting a victory again? Because probably after the Liverpool defeat, they wouldn't have wanted a week off, really.
No, it would have been fascinating because they were supposed to play Arsenal away, weren't they? Imagine how much of a good game that would have been. One of the things that City are so good at, and they're so good at basically everything, that's why they win 4 out of 5 Premier Leagues, but as soon as they have a bad result, they just go and put it right straight away, and you'd never know it happened. So, we talk about other teams and, how's this going to affect them? City normally just get straight back on with it. Okay, so they didn't have that game in midweek, but again, talking about the fixtures and how they lie, and, Liverpool playing Forest this weekend, that's an opportunity for them. City's fixtures, they've got Brighton, they've got Leicester away, and then they've got Brentford and Fulham at home. That's a nice little rundown to the World Cup. So look, and they're through in the Champions League group already as well. So that's very nice. And tomorrow, Arsenal away would have been, I'm sure they'd have relished it.
Yeah.
But Brighton at home, that's just, they'll just click it back into that gear, and Haaland will probably score a couple. Maybe I'm just being really blasé about it, but that's just how it feels, isn't it? That's just what City do. They've done it for years. Yeah.
In terms of their home form as well this season, Farah, Manchester City have been absolutely relentless, scoring goals for fun. When you look at this goes back to the last 9 home Premier League results, so going back to last season as well. Look how many goals they're scoring. It's almost ridiculous. At least 3 in every home match.
Crazy, and they've got a monster of a striker, unhuman at times, in Haaland, that just adds to that. And you've seen, the form he's now got at home. It's going to be difficult for Brighton, I think, going there tomorrow. They don't score goals, Brighton. And so I think that, you're going to Manchester City, a team that don't score that many goals, they're going to struggle. The good thing is that Brighton, they're very good at keeping the ball, so equally, it'll be quite an open game, and, it's not like they're going to sit back against Manchester City. But as I said, the only thing is Brighton don't score many goals, and you can just see Haaland here in the box. They're frightening, aren't they? In that final third, Manchester City are frightening, and I know everybody keeps saying, Arsenal are top of the league at the minute, and do you really think they can push Manchester City? I don't think anybody can. I think they're phenomenal. I think, look at that from Foden. Yeah. They've just got so much in attack. I know they you look at the Liverpool game, and defensively, the goal they conceded and the chances they conceded to Liverpool. I know Pep wasn't happy with it because he's a perfectionist, and some of the counter attacks that they didn't prevent when he's so hot on that on preventing that, he weren't happy with. But I'm not sure a Brighton team's going to turn up and play a similar way to that. They're more possession based, so they're going to play out, which the counter press Manchester City love.
It's not just Haaland as well they have to watch out for. It's every single player in the team, isn't it? I mean, when you look at Kevin De Bruyne's numbers from this season, he's already got 9 assists, which is more than double of any other player in the Premier League so far.
Well, he just makes the right decision. When we were seeing those goals there was the one where he slipped through for Foden, and Foden chipped the finish, but he makes the right decision because Haaland had gone to the right and the defenders had gone with him, so I'll just give it to Phil then. And then the one before, I think they showed, was Haaland's hat-trick goal against United in the derby.
Yeah.
De Bruyne was in the middle of the goal, so you think maybe he could have a shot there, but he knew this wasn't his assist. But he knew play the ball outside because Gomez, the left back, will put it back in for that low cross, which City love and Haaland loves. So De Bruyne makes those right decisions, and even though he's got 9, there was that other one. And another couple, actually, where he's setting other people in for them to make the assist. And you've got Foden. Grealish has only got 1 this season, but that goal he scored against Wolves when he was attacking from the back post.
Yeah.
Those balls that City like to play from the right, now that they've got Haaland, it's great because if it misses Haaland, whoever's playing on the left and following from behind, it was like how Sterling got so many goals when De Bruyne was aiming for Aguero. If Aguero missed it, Sterling would get it. They've just so many threats.
De Bruyne must be loving it though.
Yeah.
Somebody that can create the way he does, and he sees so many pitches early, but he's got a runner and a mover in Haaland, and his movement's very good, and it's just finding him. And now he's got somebody that does that and stretches, because so often we've had the false 9 at Manchester City. He likes to play on the shoulder. Haaland can come into that pocket, but you know, he must be relishing playing with him up top.
Yeah, I know you've already said that you don't really give Brighton much chance in this game, Sam. But what have you made of them so far under Roberto De Zerbi? He's yet to win, but the Liverpool performance in his first game was excellent, and they've not been short of chances. I think they've had 54 shots since Trossard's hat-trick in 3 games and not scored. So what have you made of the football they've been playing under the new manager?
Well, it's kind of, in that way, it's very much the same as it has been, you know, under Graham Potter. And until this season, obviously, when they were really good, everyone who knows, and that's why he's ended up at Chelsea, everyone knows how good a coach he is because the team was incredibly well coached, but they didn't always have the goals to kind of prove it. And this is similar. So that Forest game the other night, they weren't missing a lot. You know, I was saying the City-Liverpool game, City could have won that quite easily if, you know, with a bit of luck. Brighton could have quite easily won that the other night. But the problem again is, you're just talking about luck with the fixtures. Whereas City's got quite lucky with the fixtures after Anfield, you'd expect it to go quite well. Brighton feels like maybe after the Forest game the other night, they're not missing a lot, but then they are missing a lot to beat City. You know, if they were playing somebody else at the Amex this weekend, you'd think, OK, they're set up quite well. It's just going to be really difficult. Whose fault is it, though, that they're not putting those chances away?
I don't know, it just looks as if they just snatch at chances. They're not composed, are they, in that final third area? I think Welbeck's, you know, having him back, and he looks really sharp this season. I think if he can get more regular games like he is, I think, and find that composure in that final third, he'll come good for Brighton. They're creating a lot more chances, I think, than under Potter. They're more front-footed, although they play the same way. So he hasn't really changed much. This Brighton team is very fixed in how they play and exciting on the eye. But I just think you can see with the chances there, they're really good chances. It's just having that composure in that final third and inside the 18-yard box to put them away.
They don't have a finisher, do they? Like Trossard's City could play without Ronaldo for so long because that's City and they got Foden and they can score goals and De Bruyne can score goals. When you try and do it at Brighton, you can control games.
Enough to score. It's just that they've just got to be more composed. It's different if they wasn't creating. It's they're in those areas, and you know you'd be complaining if they weren't in those areas. They're in there. They just have to be composed of them. Like the chances we just seen there, you're unopposed. You can take a touch and just snatch in. Yeah. I don't know why.
Well, maybe we'll find out this weekend. Let's see. Right, we're going to take a break now. When we return, we're going to be focusing on the big game this weekend between Chelsea and Manchester United, with Cristiano Ronaldo being dropped from the Manchester United squad. Well, it's a massive game, Chelsea against Manchester United. Let's hear from both managers ahead of this one. Erik ten Hag, but first, Graham Potter.
I have a huge respect for Ten Hag and the job that he's done in his career and the quality as a coach. You can see that people adapt and people adjust as they go into the competition phase. So I think they've done well. They've obviously not a great start from their perspective, but they've battled back and they're getting points and they're playing well. So it's going to be a tough game.
So after Rayo Vallecano, I thought it's unacceptable, but he wasn't the only one, but that is for everyone. So when it's the second time, that will have consequences. That is now what we did, and so we miss him tomorrow, and that is a miss for us, for the squad. It's a miss, but I think it's important for the attitude, for the mentality from the group. And now we have to focus on Chelsea, and that is the most important.
So Erik ten Hag confirming that Cristiano Ronaldo is not part of the matchday squad for the match at Chelsea this weekend, after he refused to come on as a substitute in the match against Spurs midweek and left Old Trafford early before the game was over as well. Erik ten Hag chose to make Ronaldo train separately from the group and now will not be involved with the rest of the squad this weekend. How strong a message is Erik ten Hag sending out, Farah, with the way he's dealt with this?
I think a good message. I think, you know, he's showing who's in charge. I think if he didn't deal with this issue, as he mentioned there, it's happened in pre-season and a few players did it and they let it go under the carpet. They spoke about it. But to do it again in a game, as obvious as that, I think, you know, for Ronaldo, it's poor judgment. I think his decision-making in terms of doing that and you know, not wanting to come on and help your team who, you know, against the Tottenham team, it's probably their best game of the season. So you should want to be a part of that. He's turned a very good Man United performance and he's switched the focus onto himself. Really selfish of him. I think he's showing who's in charge. And I think in terms of the younger players, if you can do it to somebody of Ronaldo's status, then you can do it with anyone. And so I think the fact that he's done that to Ronaldo, these younger players will know there's a way of dealing with things, and it's not in the way that Ronaldo showed against Tottenham in midweek.
Could this be the start of winning around a huge fan base at Manchester United, who some maybe weren't sure as of yet of what Erik ten Hag was going to achieve at the club, but after their best performance of the season against Tottenham in that win midweek, and then a strong message being sent out like this now, could this be the start of the turnaround?
Yeah, it should help. The thing with Ronaldo is he's always going to have fans. And like in football in this day and age, it's not necessarily fans of the club. Ronaldo will have picked up fans from Real Madrid and Juventus and kind of followed him to United, and they're always going to follow Ronaldo and back him regardless. But that's the interesting thing. Like, football is so kind of public relations facing and so obvious. If Ronaldo had just kept his head down and been annoyed, there could be stories in the papers about Ronaldo's not being professional or whatever, and you wouldn't really know whether to believe it, because you think, well, it's Cristiano Ronaldo, he must be behaving properly. But then to go and do that so publicly, I think it could be a real benefit for Ten Hag. Like Farah was saying, for the young players, it sets an example. It's a bit like what happened at Arsenal with Mikel Arteta. With Aubameyang, it was almost like he was looking for somebody to make an example of, and I think Jose Mourinho does that sometimes unfairly. When he goes into clubs, he makes example of players, so everybody knows they've got to fall into line. But Ronaldo's kind of handed it to him on a plate. Like, nobody's disputing that the action Ten Hag's taken is wrong, really. And the only way you can maybe pick fault in it is say he should just ban him for longer.
I think what's
because he's saying after this game he'll be back in, but I don't know if he should be.
I think what's disappointing with Ronaldo is that he stands for being that role model and really trying to help and set examples for these young players. And he speaks about having done that throughout his career, because as a young player coming in at Man United, that's what he did. The older players, more experienced, he'd listen to. But these are bad examples. Since coming back to Man United, when things haven't gone his way, he spat his dummy out. I think he's acted really immaturely at Man United since his return, and I haven't for 1 minute he set a good example since his return to Man United for some of these youngsters. Even on the pitch, you could see when Sancho and Rashford were playing alongside him, not petrified is probably the wrong word, but they were so intimidated playing in and around him if they didn't give him the correct pass. And so I didn't think that he's actually, since his return, has been a good role model for these younger players, even though publicly he tries to say that's what he wants to do.
What does it suggest about Ronaldo's future at Manchester United? Can we expect him to leave the club in January if he's allowed to?
Well, I mean, he's obviously trying to engineer it as much as possible. I think he wanted to go in the summer. Certain people at United didn't want that to happen because, of everything he brings off the pitch, and you could still argue on the pitch if they played like they did last season because he scored goals. They didn't want that to happen. I think I was only on this show 2 weeks ago with Tim Sherwood, and I was like, I think Ten Hag would have got rid of him in the summer, but it wasn't really his decision. So it just depends now if those people at United are still saying, it's Ronaldo, we've got to keep this guy, or if things like this are going to say, he's got to go. I suppose it depends, because it really is unbelievable. Because from my point of view in the media, it's great having Farah on, because Farah can explain so many things that we don't understand as people who haven't played football. But in the media, I could sit here and say, oh, Ronaldo's done this, and he's done this, and he's done this. But nothing's official, and nobody sitting at home is going to know for a fact if I'm telling the truth or not. Or I could even be wrong because, the sourcing or whatever. But the mad thing is, this is all played out publicly. Ronaldo did that, knowing how it would go down, trying to kind of force his way out. So if he does come back in, what next? If United play really well, and again, I think the catalyst for it was United playing so well against Spurs, possibly thought, I can't believe they're doing this without me, I can't handle it, I'm off. If the United do keep on playing well and there's no place for him, it sounds very dramatic, but what steps would he take next to force him out? And then at what point would United say, okay, yeah, he needs to go? The other element is, where does he go?
Yeah. Well, it's fascinating to see how this is all going to unfold, and a bit of a shame, as you say, that this story has overshadowed what was an excellent performance by Manchester United midweek, which now carries them into this Chelsea game. And Chelsea are in very good form themselves, Farah, unbeaten under Graham Potter so far. What do you expect the game to be like?
Difficult with Graham Potter to know what team he's going to put out, what formation he's going to go with, because I think he's tinkered a little bit since coming in from Brighton. He's certainly, the opening game in the Champions League wasn't great, and then he's gone on from there. But he does tend to rotate the team quite often. 5 or 6 players tend to come out. He flips from a back 4 in the Premier League to 5 in the Champions League. So it'll be interesting. What I like about him is defensively, Chelsea are conceding less goals.
How much is that is down to Kepa?
Yeah, I think he's been impressive. Kepa, I mean, coming in and changing your number one straight away, which is what he did. He gave Mendy a chance. He was in bad form when Potter came in, but Kepa's been phenomenal. I mean, for somebody that was wrote off by many, as a young goalkeeper, to then come back in and have the performances he's done, and and it was in all of the games played. He's had to save Chelsea in big moments. He's pulled off some really, really big saves. So he's certainly been important to this team. And especially, as I said there, when Chelsea are changing that back line from a 4 to a 5, sometimes if you have a constant keeper and somebody that's in form who you can trust behind you, I think gives those players that come in the confidence. But I'm excited by Potter being at Chelsea and what he can bring. I was excited when I watched him with the Brighton team. He's now got arguably better calibre of players to work with. Hence why we're seeing the crazy formation changes and tactical changes, because he's such a good coach.
And Mason Mount has been flourishing under Graham Potter as well. He's the only outfield player to have started every single game under the new manager, and he's set to make his 100th Chelsea appearance if he starts this game, which you'd expect him to, barring any injuries or anything happening. How much do you think his improvement this season is down to the fact that Graham Potter's clearly made him his main man?
Yeah, it could be, because we were talking about Brighton earlier on and why they don't score goals and how it's kind of similar to Potter before, because they had these players who were like technicians, like Mason Mount, you'd say at Brighton, not quite at that level, but players like that who aren't necessarily clinical, but they had a lot. And it seems like that's the way Potter likes his players to work. The thing with Mount is he's been good for a long time now. I was just thinking when you were saying there, remember when people used to say that he was like Frank Lampard's like teacher's pet or whatever, and that's the only reason he played, which was just nonsense. Like, he's always been really good. And yeah, Chelsea are a funny one because they haven't really had that number 9. Well, like, for as long as anyone can remember, they've had famous problems with number 9. So they need other options. And Mount's got goals in him. He's shown that under previous managers. There's been so much chopping and changing at Chelsea. He's probably used to it. And Potter coming in, I think he's used to working with those players, likes working with those players, and knows how to get them in those areas to score goals. And we have seen him before. He knows how to finish. He's not, ultra prolific, but you can see him carrying on and being a big part of this team. And also, obviously, with the World Cup coming up, you can make a bit of a push for that.
Absolutely. Right, Southampton against Arsenal also this weekend. Let's hear from Mikel Arteta and Ralph Hasenhüttl.
We are flexible, meanwhile, this is good, and I think against such teams it is necessary to be in some things a little bit surprising for them, because they are too good and they prepare for this game, and they are too strong to not find solutions against you. So you have to be on your highest tactically and physically, and also with your positive mindset. I think this have to be on the highest level, but when it is, then you have always a chance.
Well, it's difficult. Obviously, we have a day to prepare the game. Obviously, we have watched certain games. We haven't finalized all the preparation because we have a training session tomorrow. And against us, they played in various ways. So we know what we can expect, but we don't have certainty how they're going to start the game. The winning percentage is extremely high. The way we are performing is really good, and we are in the position that we want to be.
Well, Arsenal are having their best ever start to a Premier League season. They are still top, and after Manchester City losing last weekend, they're probably going to stay there this weekend as well, Sam. What have you made of them, and how realistic is their title challenge?
Yeah, it's difficult. It's two different answers, I think. What I've made of them, I've been really impressed. They've been great. Probably carried this on longer than I thought they would have. Well, it probably is controversial, but everybody in the media seems to say the same thing. Whether it's pundits or journalists or, I don't know, maybe even players. I'm not expecting this title push to go on all season. Said earlier on, it's a shame that City didn't play Arsenal this week, because that would have been a great test for both teams. But also, I do get the feeling that whenever that game's played in like March time, City will just be miles clear. And that might be really, I think it is probably unfair, because they've started so well. They deserve to be top. There's no kind of, you've only played this team and you've only played that team now, because they've played good teams. They've come through and they've won the game. So I have been really impressed with them. Didn't expect them to be this good. So absolutely fair play. But I don't expect them to win the league. But maybe I'll come back in here in March and they are still top, and you think, I've got to believe it now because they're still there.
I think they can go to the World Cup.
Top by the World Cup.
Yeah.
Well, City's games are easy though, aren't they? Fairly, those
Chelsea,
4 games I mentioned.
Arsenal only faced Chelsea in I would say the toughest game in their build to the break. But I just think that they've all bought it. It's took Arteta a while, but I think they've all bought into how he wants to play. He's got the players that he wants there now. I think Jesus has been a fantastic signing for them. And in terms, we think about teams that have been successful, and the Man City team and Liverpool team, that front four has always been the reason why. And you look at Arsenal's front four now: Martinelli, Jesus, Odegaard, Saka. Arguably they're as good as, they're better than, I would say, the Liverpool front four at the minute. It's only the Man City one that's better than them. So I think that they can sustain it. And I think if they go into the break top of the league, Arsenal will have to invest in January because the squad depth isn't good enough.
Well, I read an interesting article this week about the fact that it's quite interesting that Pep Guardiola has almost given Arsenal the tools to go on this title challenge against them because, of course, signing Jesus and Zinchenko this summer. How much do you read into that?
Well, I mean, they've definitely helped, haven't they? Like, I think that just goes to show, we talked earlier on about the amount of good things that City do and the amount of good things they've got, like the level of ability and professionalism in that squad. You know, we talked about they lose a game and then they just bounce straight back as if it's never happened. That is the mentality that's all the way through the squad. So to take even just two of those players, you'd probably say the least kind of popular or famous or talented players at City, but then to go to Arsenal and completely shake that up and new levels of professionalism, technical ability, it really has helped. In terms of City and Guardiola's stance, it's always, if you want to go and you've got a good offer, you can go. I think ideally they probably would have wanted them to sell them abroad, but if Arsenal were the ones paying, City were never going to stand in their way. So it is interesting how it's panned out, but also the other side to that response from City is probably, okay, well, it's just a challenge.
Yeah.
We'll go again. Maybe they wouldn't have sold them to Liverpool, maybe, but anyone else, you just think, well, we've got Haaland, we've got Alvarez, we've got these guys. We'll go in our own direction.
How much of this with Arsenal may come down to the psychological pressure then, and how much will having players like Jesus and Zinchenko who have won the title before help in the dressing room?
Yeah, I think their experience and as you mentioned there, the mentality, I think that's a huge thing, because I remember speaking to Sterling when he signed for Chelsea, and he actually mentioned about the mentality at Chelsea not being great. Obviously he's come from Manchester City and the standards there are so much higher. So it's interesting that you say that, and I can imagine they would have brought that experience and that mentality to this young Arsenal team, and they are young and quite inexperienced. So I think that experience will help them, but also the young players that went through last season, pushed all the way for that fourth and just missed out. I think they would have learned a lot from that. And you've even seen in Saka's performances, he's matured massively from last season. And he's shown that maturity level of somebody way beyond his years. So I think adding those two players in particular is certainly going to help them. And as I say, I think they can push all the way. I think they'll certainly be 1 and 2, I reckon.
And there's just a special atmosphere,
the culture
environment
there.
around.
It's the fans,
and the fans as well.
They've got the
singing
fans
that
back on
Saliba
board.
song, and they were loving it.
The fans were so against them, wasn't they? So to have your fans behind you, and the players certainly before, they didn't have that last year. They're pushing for fourth last year, and they didn't have the fans on board. They've got the fans on board now, driving them on as well in difficult moments. What they've shown this year, though, is that they've won games that last year they couldn't win. Leeds away last weekend.
Yeah.
They should have lost that game.
Yeah.
If you watched it, they were under the cosh pretty much most of the game, and they come out on top.
And that Liverpool game.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Defensively as well, they've improved a lot this season, and it was announced today that Gabriel signed a new contract, another boost coming into this game at the weekend. Southampton are a strange team, though, because sometimes they can spring an odd result. Do you give them any chance?
Yeah, I think in my predictions, I've gone for a draw.
Have you?
Yeah, but I think it's part of, I'm just trying to test out Arsenal, you know what I mean? Like, if they do fall away, then it's going to be results like this. And if they don't fall away, then they'll win 4-0, and I'll be like, OK, I'll give them more credit next time I'm doing the prediction. But Southampton do get those funny results. I think initially I wrote down 4-1 to Arsenal, but then I thought, no, Southampton, they can spring a bit of a surprise. Maybe Arsenal will see what they're about. So Arsenal probably will win. But Southampton, they can,
OK, well, we'll come on to your predictions
They can do it.
in the next part of the show. We're going to take a break now. When we return, we'll continue previewing the weekend's games, including West Ham taking on Bournemouth. We'll dip into FPL and we'll get to Sam's predictions. Welcome back to Team Talks. Now time to talk fantasy Premier League teams. We've got our FPL expert, Wes, aka FPL Heisenberg, joining us now. And Wes, you've picked out 3 players that you think we should all be buying right now. We're going to start with Trent Alexander-Arnold. I'm surprised about this one because I think everyone got rid of him a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, myself included, Jules. But yeah, he's back in the team now after his minor injury, wasn't it? 8 points last game week, Nottingham Forest away this week, and good fixtures right up until the World Cup break. So he's not in my team, but if I was looking at a defender, I'd be trying my hardest to get Trent back into my team.
7.2 million. It's a lot of money for a defender, but when he scores goals like that and he can provide assists, then certainly worth it. What about Phil Foden? He's in my team, so I'm glad to hear that you're giving him as one of your buys of the week.
Yeah, he's looking like a really great pick at the minute, especially if you could go for someone like, say, De Bruyne from that City midfield, but Foden, you save around 4 million on De Bruyne compared to, Foden's like 4 million cheaper roughly. And, he's been outscoring De Bruyne this season, goals, assists. So, yeah, hat-trick in the Manchester derby, wasn't it? So, yeah, he's looking like an amazing asset for the next 4 game weeks up until the World Cup break.
And then finally, you've picked Darwin Núñez, who's actually a doubt for this weekend's game, and you're telling us to buy him. What's going on?
Yeah, well, that was before the news broke, but still, I think he'll be okay. And like with Trent, he has got good fixtures coming up now. There's a lot of other injuries at Liverpool, which made me think he was nailed on. If this injury does put you off, though, also consider Gabriel Jesus, another one who was popular, but a lot of people moved him on, like myself a few weeks ago. But he's got a good run of fixtures and a good way into the Arsenal attack now as well.
OK, finally, Wes, just a quick question on the captaincy. Everyone's been captaining Haaland every single game week, which seems the wise thing to do. But is there an outside shout with Man City not scoring in their last 2 games to go for Salah captain this week at Nottingham Forest?
Yeah, absolutely. Salah looked amazing against Man City, didn't he? And obviously he got the hat-trick in the Champions League before. He blanked last game week against West Ham, which was a bit disappointing. He was playing right mid of a 4-4-2, which is a bit new for Liverpool, isn't it? However, I do think he'll be back up front this game week alongside either Darwin or Firmino. So I think he will be more central this week. So I think it could be a good shout. Haaland's obviously Haaland, isn't he? And also Foden, again, like we just spoke about, if you want to go against Haaland, then yeah, Foden or Salah's probably the next best bet.
Wes, thank you very much. Good to see you as always, and good luck with FPL this weekend if you're playing along. Right, next up, let's talk about West Ham against Bournemouth. We're going to look ahead to this one a bit differently, though. Declan Rice and Ryan Fredericks are good mates, so we got the pair of them to sit down together and interview each other ahead of Monday's match. Well, they'll be reunited on the pitch this weekend, but this time playing for different teams. Let's talk West Ham first of all. I think you mentioned earlier, Sam, that you thought that they were actually a bit unlucky against Liverpool in the week. What have you made of their start to the season? They seem to be struggling to score goals, don't they?
Yeah, I think fans are getting a bit annoyed, just generally defensive tactics, particularly like in the first half. They're just very kind of circumspect and waiting to see what happens in the game. And then after half-time, if they're still in the game, they can kind of turn things around, but it does leave you open to a slow start. And I guess they were unlucky at Anfield, but that's what happened there. So yeah, then they've got the new guy in, Scamacca, who's stopped scoring as soon as I put him into my FPL team, but he was doing well before that. But now everybody, well, a lot of West Ham fans seem to want him to play with Antonio, and just to kind of go for it a bit more. And I suppose, if you're not going to do it against Bournemouth on the Monday night game, then when are you ever going to do it? So it'd be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah, Bournemouth have improved a lot since Gary O'Neill has been temporary charge of the club. Just 1 defeat in their last 7 matches. Why hasn't he got the job yet?
Good question. I think the way in which Bournemouth are doing, deciding on whether to keep Gary O'Neill in charge or wait until the break, I think it's important. They don't need to rush into that decision. I certainly think, he's a fantastic coach, and I know he was at Liverpool previously in academy and really highly thought of as a coach. And the players obviously trust him. But I think that's a little bit sometimes the problem. You've heard players talk about it, and I think that, because they do get on so well with him, if he does get the job, does that then change, the dynamic whilst he's not in charge and everything's going well? It's okay. But I think he's done a phenomenal job, and you think about the comments from Scott Parker when he was there about the players not being good enough to withstand the Premier League, and they've gone on this crazy run where they've only lost 1 in 7. So I think he's done a great job. I think if he can continue that up until the break, there's no reason why they wouldn't offer him it. As I said, he is a good coach, a young coach. That with the group of players he's got, they're certainly buying into what he's doing.
Okay, Sam, it's time for your predictions
I've
now.
Just seen some of
Let's just remind ourselves of what you've gone for then. Let's try and focus on some of the games we haven't talked about yet. So you've gone for another Palace win to back up the victory they got midweek as well. They were really good in that game to win away at Goodison Park.
Difficult one, this. because Everton, again, when I was on 2 weeks ago, they just won 2 games in a row and they had the best defensive record in the Premier League. But I was like, hold on a minute, because they've got some difficult games coming up and they've lost them all. So it's difficult to know where they are. But Palace haven't done an awful lot this season either. So I wasn't sure about this one. But I prefer Palace in terms of if both teams play well, who's more likely to win? I think Palace have got more about them. So I've just got the logic with that.
Goalfest.
There's not always
at
logic.
Ellen Road between Leeds and Fulham, though. Wowzers. What's the logic in that one?
Yeah, I'm not sure. did it before the Leeds game last night, and now I'm thinking I don't know if they've got 3 goals in them. But I just thought, Fulham are the type of team who kind of can give it a go, but maybe can get caught out, and Leeds are always going to give it a go. So I'm sure whenever I do predictions, there's always a 3-3 in there.
Do you agree, Farrell, with the Spurs-Newcastle result? 1-1?
1-1. At Spurs, I think Spurs are in a bad moment. I think it's crazy they're third, right? But in terms of their league position, and if you put it to the performances, it doesn't match up, does it? And I think Newcastle actually performing really well. Lack of goals,
really
but
good,
they are. Yeah. They look good under Eddie Howe. Tottenham at home, yeah. I mean, maybe a draw probably with the home form. So yeah.
2-2 between Villa, who are now managerless, against Brentford, but you fancy them to put in a bit of a performance?
Well, yeah. So before Gerrard got sacked last night, I put 3-1 or 4-1 to Brentford because I was like, there's going to be a big result comes up that's going to get him sacked, and I just thought, mate, I'm going to make it this one. But now Gerrard's gone, they might have a bit of a bounce. And considering I thought they were going to get heavily beaten, 2-2's an improvement on that.
All right. And an absolute thriller at Molineux between Wolves and Leicester, 0-0. Thanks for the 4-0 for Manchester City against Brighton. It could be worse, to be fair. Could be worse. Sam Farah, thank you very much for your company. Enjoy the football this weekend, and we will see you next time on Team Talks. Bye-bye.